Fashion dolls have been a staple of many people's childhoods for nearly a century now, and none more famous than Barbie. Barbie has been synonymous with fashion in childhood since 1959, but as we all know, not every parent loves Barbie's high fashion and pink lifestyle. So much so that some people have taken the negative publicity and created their own doll lines. Did kids love these dolls as much? Were these dolls actually successful in their mission? And how do these dolls influence the very line that they sought against? Let's find out. Just a heads up that this video will be mentioning body types, weight, and a little bit of disorders, as well as some fat phobia, so here is your trigger warning. I won't go too much into detail about these topics, but if you are sensitive to discussions of body image and potentially fat phobia, then I would suggest skipping this video. Okay, let's get into it. There are two lines that we will be focusing on that attempted to dethrone Barbie with wholesomeness and realism, but before we jump into them, we need some context as to why so many people hated Barbie in the first place. Ever since the doll's introduction in 1959, Barbie has always had an incredibly slender body. So much so that, according to an article by Psychology Today, although the quote was taken from the Daily Mail, a less than credible source, quote, "If Barbie were a real woman, her size and shape would leave her with only half a liver and a few inches of intestine," unquote. So, unrealistically thin. The first real controversy surrounding Barbie's body occurred in the 1960s with two different releases, the Babysitter set and the Sleepover set. The Babysitter set came with a book on how to lose weight, with the only thing it containing were the words, "Don't eat." The Sleepover set gave Barbie a scale that read 110. I'm assuming that means 110 pounds. Barbie's height, if she were a real person, is assumed to be 5'9". Assuming this is true, this would mean that Barbie is about 35 pounds underweight, resulting in her having a BMI of about 16.2, increasing health risks such as osteoporosis, frequent infections, irregular periods, and severe fatigue. While these were large controversies for the time, one of the biggest controversies surrounding Barbie's body started in the early to mid-2000s with the publication of the paper "Does Barbie Make Girls Want to Be Thin? The Effect of Experimental Exposure to Images of Dolls on the Body Image of 5 to 8-year-old Girls." The paper, published by Dr. Helga Dittmar, showed 162 girls aged between 5 and 8 pictures of Barbie dolls and M dolls. Dr. Dittmar and her associates found that, quote, "Girls exposed to Barbie reported lower body esteem and greater desire for thinner body shape than girls in the other exposure conditions," unquote. They also found it was typically the younger girls who had an increased risk of body image issues, specifically the 5 and 6-year-olds. These at-risk children were at an increased risk of disordered eating and yo-yo weight changing later in life. With the publication of this article in 2006, this started an entire phenomenon known as the Barbie body effect, where parents were outraged over Barbie's influence on their child's body image. This sparked widespread news coverage in the early 2010s from the likes of CNN, Teen Vogue, and even Psychology Today. Articles, news reports, videos, and more were coming out left, right, and center about this study. Parents were outraged. The already dipping sales of Barbie went down even further. It was a madhouse of negative PR. Now keep in mind that Barbie wasn't the only target. Monster High, Bratz, and other fashion doll lines were under fire as well. Barbie was the main target, as she is the leader of fashion dolls, even to this day. This was also before Mattel introduced different body types for both Barbie and Monster High, with these lines defaulting to ultra-thin bodies. From the ashes of this controversy rose two separate doll lines, each attempting to take down Barbie as a more wholesome and healthier alternative. The first we will be addressing is the somewhat infamous Lammily. 3, 2, 1. Lammily is a brand of dolls created by photographer and digital artist Nicolas Lamb in 2014. In 2013, just 1 year before the creation of Lammily, Lamb created a prototype using 3D printing of a doll based on the average proportions of a 19-year-old American woman according to the CDC. The prototype doll, dubbed the normal Barbie by the media, was also modeled on a Barbie doll that Lamb had found. The doll became quite the hit, appearing on major news outlets and getting a lot of buzz on social media. So much so that even Demi Lovato praised the doll. This media frenzy caught so many people's attention that orders started to come in for the normal Barbie. This inspired a crowdfunding campaign that was started to create a new company so that people could get their hands on this normal Barbie. The new company was named Lammily, a portmanteau of lamb and family. The first Lammily doll to be released was known as the Traveler doll, released in 2014. The Traveler doll came with a single outfit, a pair of white sneakers, and a pamphlet with the story behind that individual character, whose name I have no idea. And that was it. The doll is 11 inches tall, has slightly tan skin, mid-length brown hair, and blue-gray eyes. Her single outfit consists of a blue ombre blouse and denim shorts. She has articulation in her elbows, neck, hands, ankles, and click joints in her knees. The doll retailed for about $29.99 when she came out. Pretty pricey for a fashion doll, even by today's standards. The price rose to $39.99 when I checked the Lammily website in 2024. I'm not sure when the price went up, but I assume it was after 2020 due to the rising inflation. The Traveler isn't the only Lammily doll available. About 2 years after the release of said Traveler in 2016, 2 new dolls would be released, the Photographer and the Animal Rescuer. The Photographer doll was a darker-skinned doll with mid-length, coily black hair and gray eyes. Just like with the Traveler doll, she came with one singular outfit, in this case a white puff sleeve blouse, a hibiscus patterned skirt, and a pair of yellow flats. The doll also was the same size and had the same articulation as the Travel doll, as well as retailing for the same price of $39.99. The last doll was the Animal Rescue doll, or the Boy Lammily, as it's sometimes referred to. Interestingly enough, unlike the female dolls, the Boy Lammilly's proportions were based on data collected by Dr. Matthew Reed from the University of Michigan. I'm guessing the CDC didn't have the average proportions of a 19-year-old American male, but I have no idea why Lamb decided to change his source for these sizes. Anyway, the doll has pale skin, short brown hair, and blue eyes. His single outfit comes with a red, gray, and white gingham top, blue jean shorts, and brown moccasins. He also has the same points of articulation, is the same size, and costs the same as the Photographer and Traveler Lammilys. Along with the dolls, the Lammily site sells clothing and accessories, including a wheelchair, a period party pack, and a pack of stickers to give your doll things such as acne and stretch marks. As of 2024, there have been no new dolls for Lammily, the press has dried up, and most of the products on Lammily's site have either been discontinued or are out of stock. Lammily seems to be hanging on by a thread, and may not be long for this world. This is especially true as Barbie and Monster High have since diversified their lines, but we'll get back to that. I actually had a Lammily doll. Well, actually it was my ex-stepsister who had one. So, my evil stepmother completely forbade me and my stepsister from playing with most dolls due to said Barbie body effect. She ended up buying us a Lammily doll, specifically the Traveler doll, when she first came out. Both of us were a bit older at the time. I was 12 and she was 11, but the two of us had intense imaginations, so we still liked playing with dolls. So, as a tween, what did I think of Lammily? Well, for starters, I remember her being of pretty decent quality. The plastic was good, with no obvious seams. The clothes were decent. They were alright. The only issue I had was that her hands and feet would pop off a ton. They were pretty easy to pop back in, but still. So, neither me nor my stepsister really liked Lammily all that much. Both of us thought she was super boring and rather odd looking. We would play more with her Disney Fairy and Princess dolls, as well as my Novi Stars and MLPs. Yeah, she wasn't much of a winner as a tween. Something about her strange proportions or extremely boring nature didn't resonate with either of us, and she often went forgotten. Now that it's been about 10 years, what do I think of her and all the other dolls as an adult collector? Yeah, I'm still not huge on Lammily. On the one hand, I totally understand why Lammily was necessary. It was true that some girls were being influenced by Barbie, as well as other factors, to later develop these body issues. Average or plus-sized dolls just weren't super common, especially for kids. Lammily just came out at the right time. She was the only doll that wasn't extremely thin on the market, at least for kids' fashion dolls. While I do personally think Lammily was at least a good idea, I certainly have my issues with them. My first issue is just how boring these dolls are. I understand that they're supposed to be like the average person, but that just doesn't give kids a lot to grasp onto. Typically when kids are interested in dolls, they like their faces, or their clothing, or the accessories they come with. Lammily just doesn't offer much. They don't really come with any accessories, their outfits are pretty boring, and their faces are just really dull and bland. The dolls themselves don't really have any stories tied behind them. Their one and only trait is the hobby that they're named after. That's it! No jobs, no aspirations, not even a name! They're as bland as a bowl of unflavored oatmeal. And you can't get much more boring than that. So, I believe the idea was to give kids a blank slate, but kids need some sort of inspiration, something to jump off of. And these dolls don't provide that. Kids also just don't care about realism. Kids like crazy and fun designs. Think of why lines like Monster High are so popular. Lammily is just boring. And as we all know, kids despise boring. Issue number 2 is with the price. I understand that Lammily is produced by a small company, but you can get a lot more bang for your buck with Lottie, and Lottie is also produced by a small company. The dolls themselves are currently about $40, and the accessories and clothing can vary in price. Outfits cost between $18 and $30, and many of them don't even come with shoes. This wouldn't be an issue if it wasn't for Lammily's unique body proportions forcing consumers to buy Lammily branded clothing and only Lammily clothing. It is neat how there are a variety of different professions and even some cloth face masks, but they're just not worth the price. Not just that, but there are a limited number of outfits and none of them are particularly interesting. And as we said earlier, kids don't do boring. This wouldn't be as big of an issue if it wasn't for the quality of the clothing. The clothes are of mediocre quality. Certainly not the worst I felt, but definitely not worth the asking price, especially for something like the kaleidoscope dress that cost $30. That is nearly as much as the doll itself. This is especially true for parents who may not otherwise be able to afford these dolls, or for parents who don't want to spend large amounts of money on kids' toys. My biggest issue is the heavy focus on Lammily's body and them being average. Most, if not all, of the marketing surrounding Lammily was focused on the dolls' bodies. Just about every single article or interview or anything focuses extremely heavily on how average each doll's body is. I just feel like that goes against the whole idea. Wasn't the whole problem with Barbie people focusing on her body? As kids grow up, they learn that real adults don't look like Barbie. But the way Lammily is marketed, kids expect to grow up to look just like them. What happens if they don't? That could potentially mess them up worse than Barbie. To make matters worse, every Lammily doll has essentially the same body type. In fairness, there are only 3 dolls, but for a doll line that focuses so heavily on being healthy or the anti-Barbie, they sure do lack body diversity. Not only that, but the heavy focus on them being average might alienate some people. Some kids just aren't interested in things like photography or traveling. Some may enjoy fashion or makeup or other things that Lammily goes against. The way Lammily is marketed makes it feel like they're telling people, this is how a girl should act and should be, and if they're different, then you're part of the problem and you're failing as a parent. If you like pink and frills, then you're no better than Barbie. That's rather strange for a doll line that's whole branding is that they're inclusive. What doesn't help is that Lamb has basically admitted in interviews that he only created Lammily for the money and the publicity. The whole thing just feels gross. especially since he also included pad stickers. Like, for periods. What also doesn't help is that, at least based in my own personal experience, I view Lammily as a doll that is purchased by ultra-strict parents who think that everyone has to conform to their views and they can never be wrong. You know, the kind of people who abuse their kids and then blame society for their child's shortcomings. To wrap up my thoughts on Lammily, she's a boring doll created on the coattails of a controversy for the sake of money and fame, and is only purchased by insecure parents to make themselves feel better. If you want to learn more about Lammily, Darling Dolls made an excellent video on the subject. I'll link it in the description below, so go send them some love. The other anti-Barbie line that I want to talk about is Lottie. Lottie is a brand of child dolls released by Arkloo starting in 2012 and continuing to this day. The company was created in 2010 by Lucy Follett and Ian Harkin. Lottie's inspiration came from the founders not finding a wholesome doll for family members. This was a few years before Lammily was created. This led them to create their own doll line based on the publications of Dr. Margaret Ashwell and Professor David McCarthy. This resulted in the dolls having the same proportions as the average 9-year-old child. So, essentially the same idea as Lammily, but with child dolls rather than a 19-year-old adult. Much like with Lammily, I actually had a few of these dolls, that being the pool party, the young inventor, and the school days. I'm not really going to describe them too much here, as I already did in the doll tier list video, which you can click the iCard if you actually want to go watch that, and learn more about these particular dolls. I only have one Lottie doll left, the pool party Lottie. The other two I ended up donating to Goodwill. The dolls themselves are actually of pretty good quality. She reminds me a lot of a Laika-chan doll, in that her head and body are made out of a hard plastic. See? Her legs are a rubberized plastic with click joints, and her arms are a softer, more malleable plastic. Her face even has that slight anime look. Coincidence? Is it just me, or are the similarities to Laika-chan just a bit too similar? I don't know, maybe it is just a coincidence. The clothing is also of nice quality. The outfits are a ton more engaging than Lammily, but not quite as exciting or fun as something like Barbie or Rainbow High. Definitely closer to what children actually wear though, especially at this age. Lottie is also a lot more diverse than Lammily, at least when it comes to race. There are a bunch of Lottie dolls that have different skin tones and even different hair colors and textures. This is super important, as kids tend to gravitate more towards dolls who share race, ethnicity, and/or hair types. They even have a boy doll named Finn. While I like the doll themselves, the issue I have is, once again, the marketing, especially with the blog, or at the very least, one post from the blog. So, Lottie has a very active blog written by members of the staff. That's cool and all. But the story on how Lottie got started is interesting. The blog post, written by one of Arkloo's founders, contains pretty much all of the arguments as to why parents should buy a Lottie doll. Doesn't sound that bad, right? Well, I have my issues. These issues kind of taint the doll line for me personally. 1. They have an issue with dolls that are not super childlike and have a problem with kids who enjoy non-wholesome things. The creator said that they felt uncomfortable buying dolls that were adult-themed in nature. One of said adult-themed dolls were horror and vampire-themed. I feel like this shames kids who aren't into horror or really anything that the company doesn't personally approve of. This gives me similar vibes to Lammily with the kids aren't allowed to like things I don't personally approve of vibes. This doll line is telling kids they have to like being outside. They have to be into STEM. They're not allowed to enjoy fashion or jewelry or anything of the sort. And if you let your kids play with Barbie, then you're parenting them wrong. Basically, the message I get from Lottie's website is that kids can be anything as long as it's wholesome according to my standards. This is giving me major pearl-clutching vibes. You know, the kind of people who would scream, "Won't somebody please think of the when discussing topics they don't like, acting as if the topic in question is gonna harm their kids, even if it doesn't. Case in point, there's a picture on their site that compares Lottie to the average Barbie. That's not necessarily an issue, they gotta sell it somehow. The issue I have is that they state that, quote, Lottie doesn't wear makeup, jewelry, or high heels, unquote. While I do agree that young children shouldn't be wearing high heels or shopping at a Sephora, it's pretty normal for kids to be curious about makeup and accessories, especially around the age that Lottie is based on. Especially with the rise of beauty influencers, but even before them, it wasn't super uncommon for child and tween-centered stores such as Claire's to sell kids' makeup. Not only that, but kids give themselves makeovers all the time. Maybe that's not necessarily a good thing, but that is a totally different topic for a totally different time. Not only that, but why attack jewelry specifically? Tons of kids have lobe piercings and even wear beaded or lume jewelry. There's nothing wrong with that. Accessorizing and liking clothing is not as bad as art glue is making it out to be, and kids who like these things shouldn't feel shamed. Now, I am not saying that the founder isn't making any good points. The points that they did make about kids playing with ultra-thin dolls were indeed accurate. Kids who play with dolls with more realistic body types are indeed less likely to develop body dysmorphia in the future. The issue I have is that they're essentially saying to kids and parents that kids can only enjoy things like playing with STEM toys or playing outside, and that if kids are interested in anything like monsters, myths, fantasy, or anything other than what they consider to be okay for kids, they're wayward kids who need to have their ways changed. Basically, instead of encouraging kids to find out what they enjoy naturally, this company is saying that we need to force kids to like things we personally like, that we find wholesome, that we find is the best for their minds. Basically, making all of the decisions for them. This is going to be one of the few times in their life that they're going to have all of this available time and energy and know-how to actually find themselves and figure out what they enjoy doing. And that's not something that should be taken away from them. Now, of course, I'm not blaming Lottie for this kind of mindset. After all, they are just capitalizing on this trend. After all, this mindset has existed for a goddamn millennia at this point, at least. What I'm saying is that, at least based on my own experience as well as this post, Lottie seems to kind of approve of this sort of strict and helicopter parenting style. Another potential problem, and this could happen with Lammily as well, is that the more that these kinds of companies and these parents attack things like horror-themed dolls and makeup and dressing up and all that stuff, the more they're gonna make kids want them. This is known as the Streisand effect, where the more someone or something pushes back on something, the more the people want it or want to do it. I've actually seen many kids who were forced to play with dolls like Lammily and Lottie have this sort of effect take hold on them. Hell, I've even been one of those kids. My point is that the more you push back on these kinds of traditional fashion dolls, the more you're gonna make kids want them over your own dolls. Especially if they see their own peers with dolls like LOL OMG or the new Monster Highs. Issue number 2 is the lack of body diversity. It's a similar argument I have with Lammily, that not every person has the average body. This could potentially cause even more harm, as Lottie dolls are based on kids only about 3 to 4 years older than the target demographic. When these kids grow up a bit and possibly still play with them, this could cause more issues than they solve. In fairness, more studies are needed on these kinds of effects that Lottie and Lammily could have, but this is just the theory. My point is that some kids could potentially see themselves as not average and therefore not normal. Plus, some kids are plus-sized or extremely tall or extremely short or otherwise do not fall within this average. That and averages can change. The study they used was from over 10 years ago, after all. They may have the two main sexes and multiple races, but the lack of body diversity is a problem if the brand truly wants to be as wholesome and inclusive as they're claiming. Maybe it's not as big of a deal since like 9-year-olds don't vary in body type as much as 19-year-olds, but I still think it could be a step in the right direction. And 3, their women empowerment message. Now, I am not against empowering children to do things such as getting involved in their community. Not at all. But this is literally just inspiration porn. Kids don't normally care about stuff like this. This is another case of bias because we're different than Barbie, rather than we actually care about developing minds. Not only that, but this empowerment message only applies to girls who identify as girls. Boys are left out, almost as if they don't deserve encouragement. I know girls and women are a minority, especially in fields like STEM, but this is just another form of gender separation masked under an empowerment message. Granted, this isn't just an issue with Lottie, and once again, Lottie is just jumping on a trend, but this is an issue with like gendered STEM toys and the whole women in STEM movement, but Lottie certainly isn't helping. Maybe I'll discuss this topic in a future video, as I am indeed AFAB and am actually pursuing a STEM career. It sucks because I like these dolls for what they are, I just really hate how they're marketed. What I personally think Lottie should do is, instead of trying to market themselves as the anti-Barbie, instead focusing on the doll's own highlights. Maybe talk about how some sets come with like really fun accessories. Maybe even play into the whole imagination aspect. Really anything that isn't we're different from Barbie, therefore we're good. I also need to state this here. For all that is good and holy in this world, please do not attack or harass any of these people. Just because these people may have made some decisions that you personally disagree with, that does not mean they are bad people worth harming. The splash in the media from Lammily and Lottie created a push for a more realistic body shape in dolls. This led to the rebranding of Barbie's Fashionistas line in 2016. New dolls were introduced with new body types and even new disabilities such as Down syndrome and blindness. Some Barbies even had prosthetic limbs, and the wheelchair has even made its glorious return and could even fit in the dream house this time. Not only did Barbie see a redesign, but the often maligned Monster High as well. In 2022, G3 of Monster High was released with new body types and disability awareness, even introducing proper plus-size dolls such as Abby Abominable in 2023 and Caddy Noir in 2024. This, as well as the first confirmed autistic character in Monster High history, Twyla Boogeyman, as well as giving Frankie a prosthetic leg. Doll brands such as Monster High have even been broadening the scope in terms of introducing characters as LGBT, with Frankie now being non-binary and Cleo being in a queer relationship. Other doll brands started introducing less thin body types as well, Rainbow High being a prime example. These new body-positive and diverse dolls are by no means perfect, and there are still a ton of ultra-thin dolls out there, but with the strides companies like Mattel and Arkloo are making, we are slowly heading to a more tolerant and accepting and diverse future in the world of dolls. This kind of begs the question, can dolls like Lammily and Lottie be a good alternative to Barbies and Monster High dolls? Kind of. If a child is only exposed to dolls with realistic body types, especially during those early years, then yes, these will be great dolls for kids that would not influence their body too much. However, if a child has played with ultra-thin dolls, playing with more realistic dolls isn't gonna magically fix things. A relatively new study had 35 girls aged between 5 and 9 select between two 3D models of women, one that was ultra-thin and one that was a bit more realistic, choosing the one they'd most like to look like when they grew up. The girls were then given either an old G1 Monster High doll, an ultra-thin Barbie, a Dora, or a Lottie doll for about 5 minutes. After playing, the girls were then given the same 3D renders and asked to choose once again. What the researchers found was that playing with either the Barbie or Monster High dolls led to the girls choosing the thinner model, while the kids who played with either Dora or Lottie typically chose the same model that they chose beforehand, but they did have increased body satisfaction. A follow-up study was conducted with 54 girls between 5 and 10, where the girls were asked the same question as before and then were split into 3 groups. One group played with thin Barbies and G1 Monster Highs, another with Doras and Lotties, and the final with toy cars. About 3 minutes of play, the girls were once again asked what they wanted their ideal body to be. After answering, the girls then switched groups. The group that played with the ultra-thin dolls now played with the more proportionate dolls or the cars. Afterwards, they were asked the question one final time. What the researchers found was that, as stated by an article from Psychology Today, quote, "Unfortunately, there were no evidence that playing with realistic dolls after playing with ultra-thin dolls could undo this effect," unquote. Given how kids are, this means that essentially these kinds of dolls are pointless to buy for your kids if they've already been playing with ultra-thin dolls as a means to undo the potential effects. You can get your kids Lottie dolls, but if they play with a friend's ultra-thin Barbie dolls, then the positive effects of said Lottie dolls are undone and cannot be restored fully. Getting kids to play with plus-sized and curvier dolls is also very hard to do. Many doll lines, including Barbie, have introduced more inclusive body types, including a curvy, tall, and petite doll. However, many kids choose not to play with the curvier dolls. A study was done where researchers had kids between the ages of 3 and 5 look at drawings of different body types and ask the kids what they thought of each drawing. The curvier and plus-size drawings were described using terms such as ugly, sloppy, and loud, while the thinner drawings were described as pretty, nice, and cute. This shows that many kids tend to develop a body preference and possibly even a bias at a very young age. A similar study corroborates this. This study gave a group of girls between the ages of 3 and 10 4 different Barbie dolls with the 4 basic body types. The girls then had to point at the ones they liked the best and then the one they liked the least. Most of the girls would pick the standard Barbie as their favorite, and most pick the curvy Barbie as their least favorite. When asked why, many girls said it was because she was fat. This means that kids are less likely to play with curvy and plus-sized dolls if exposed to ultra-thin dolls. This doesn't mean that plus-sized dolls are bad, just that the issue of body bias is a lot harder to solve than we once thought, especially with how poorly society treats plus-sized and curvy people. Barbie isn't the only influence on a child's body. The film industry, the TV industry, the music industry, influencers, their peers, family members, other people on social media, and even medical professionals may push negative ideals relating to one's body, especially with the rise of fat phobia and toxic diet culture. For some reason, we as a society put so much worth on a person's weight, to a point where people will attack others based on their weight, considering them worthless. And then we wonder why people develop eating disorders. Kids may see this and think that even if they're slightly overweight, they're a waste of space. This is an extremely toxic mentality that may result in future eating disorders, anxiety, depression, and even bullying of other kids. If we truly want to protect our kids, we need to address this obsessive relation society has with being thin. Things are getting better with the body positivity movement, but we still have an ultra long way to go. And you've made it to the end. I know this video was kind of a strange topic, but an interesting and important topic nonetheless. Did any of you guys play with these dolls as a kid? Do you collect them now? Let me know what y'all think and your thoughts on the Lottie and Lammily dolls down below. And as a reminder, do not harass anybody mentioned in this video. The fact that it's 2024 and I have to say that is just pathetic. I also just want to state that I am not attacking anybody who likes these dolls. If you grew up with Lammily and Lottie and you enjoyed them, or if you're an adult collector who enjoys them now, I am by no means attacking you. That is amazing, and I'm glad that there's at least some people out there who actively enjoy these dolls. Hopefully beyond their marketing. And I also mean absolutely no ill will towards the creators of Lammily or Lottie. Even though they may have made some decisions that I don't personally agree with, I understand how difficult it is to create a company completely from scratch, especially in this capitalistic hellscape we all currently live in. We all have to make a paycheck after all. I am also very much aware that these dolls are pretty necessary when they came out and are primarily for kids. So please do not take this video the wrong way. Anyway, thanks for watching. Peace, love, and RARXD, and I hopefully will be seeing you all guys next week.